Alright, we're starting PG2 today. So we're working on properties of quadrilaterals. Okay, so normally this would be in a foldable, but we're going to do it in a digital, and it'll just go down and down and down. Alright, so these are all properties of parallelograms. Opposite sides are parallel. So we're just going to mark that. Oops. So this side is parallel to this side, and the top and the bottom are parallel to each other. So if we've got opposite sets of parallel sides, guess what? We're going to have things that happened with parallel lines, like not alternate interior, but same side, interior, yep, alternate interior, alternate exterior. Those kind of angles are creeping back. Okay, we've got opposite sides congruent. So we can mark those. The top and the bottom are congruent, and the left and the right are congruent. Opposite angles are going to be congruent. We can mark those. Now, not all four angles are going to be congruent, but you're going to have two pairs of congruent. Consecutive angles are supplementary. So this is hard to mark, but let's label it. So if we have parallelogram ABCD, angle A and angle B added together equal 180. Angle B and angle C added together equal 180. Angle C and angle D added together equal 180. And one more. Angle A and angle D added together equal 180. So consecutive angles. So if you were to throw some numbers in there, you could have like 30 and 150, and then it would be 30 and 150. And diagonals bisect each other. So draw the diagonal from corner to corner, and if they bisect each other, that means they're each cut into two equal pieces. So this point where they intersect would be a midpoint. Okay, that is parallelograms. Then we go on to rectangles. Now rectangles are parallelograms. They're just a little bit more special. So we've got the 5 things from the first page. Those apply here. Opposite angles are parallel. Opposite sides are congruent, things like that. Those all apply. This should say opposite sides are parallel. Yeah. And we have some other things. We have 4 right angles. So opposite angles are still congruent, and consecutive angles still add up to 180 because everything is a 90. The diagonals not only bisect each other, but they are congruent to each other. So I'm going to label this, because once you got intersecting diagonals, it's kind of hard to see. So AC is congruent to BD, plus they're bisected. So actually, all 4 of those little pieces are going to be the same. Alright, I guess I could have done that in 2 separate things, but I didn't. Alright, so that's the new stuff for rectangles. Then we go into rhombuses. So these start with the 5 things about parallelograms: opposite sides parallel, opposite sides congruent, opposite angles congruent, consecutive angles, and diagonals. Those still apply because rhombi are parallelograms with 4 congruent sides. Diagonals, they still bisect each other, but here they hit at a perpendicular. So they bisect and they're perpendicular. Now the diagonals aren't the same like they were in rectangles, because one is going to be much longer than the other. The diagonals bisect opposite angles. So here's what's happening. change colors. These opposite angles were congruent to begin with, but then they get bisected. So those two angles are congruent. And the same thing on the other side. These angles are bisected, so they're congruent to each other. All right, and then we have squares, which are they're parallelograms, they're rectangles, they're rhombi, so they're all of the things. So all of the things apply. Opposite sides are parallel. Opposite sides are congruent. Opposite angles are congruent. Consecutive angles are supplementary. Diagonals bisect each other. Plus all the things about rhombuses. 4 congruent sides. Diagonals are perpendicular. Diagonals bisect angles. Plus the rectangles. 4 congruent sides. Diagonals are perpendicular. Did I miss that one? Diagonals bisect opposite angles. So a square combines all of this information. I feel like I missed one. No. Diagonals of a rectangle are not perpendicular. That's a mistype. They're congruent. That's where we're going wrong here. Okay, so that is the new stuff. Then you're going to hop on over to the Google Doc that I posted today, where we're going to be doing a little bit of thinking. Okay, so here we've got the 4 properties of parallelograms, and you are going to help me. You're going to help explain why. You're going to help me explain why these are true. So if a quadrilateral is a parallelogram, then its opposite angles are congruent. Why? Tell me why. Show me why its opposite angles have to be congruent. So remember at the beginning I said if we've got parallel lines, then we're going to have some alternate interior angles, same side interior angles, things like that happening. So let's say, I can't write on this. I'm going to send this as a Cami so you can write on it. Let me change. Okay, so now we can write on things. So I know I've got my top and my bottom parallel, and that's where I'm going to start. I'm going to label it A, B, C, D. You can use whichever letters you want and whichever order you want. So if I know those two are parallel, then I know that these two angles are supplementary because they are same side interior angles. Okay, so angle A and angle D are supplementary because they are same side interiors. Okay. Now, I've got the same thing happening if I go another direction. So if I go, I'll do it red. So if I look at AD parallel to BC, now I can do my bottom two, like angle D and angle C are supplementary. So that gives me A and C opposite. So I could say angle D, that's the same reason. Angle A and D are supplementary, so also angle D and angle C are supplementary for the same reason, because they're same side interior angles. So angle A has to be congruent to angle C, and they're opposite angles. Okay, so we just showed why opposite angles of a parallelogram have to be congruent. It's all about the parallel lines. Okay, I want to skip down and also do number 4 with you. If a quad is a parallelogram, then its diagonals bisect each other. So I'm going to start by drawing, actually I should start by labeling it. Start by drawing the diagonals. So I've got diagonal AC and I've got diagonal DB. And I need a letter in the middle. So if they bisect, if I'm trying to show that they bisect each other, I need to show that AE and EC are the same. Alright, this one we're going to use congruent triangles. So I am going to try to get triangle AED congruent to triangle CEB and I got one side, I've got AD congruent to BC, and I've got the vertical angle in the middle. I need a third thing. Alright, that third thing is going to be alternate interior angles. I'll show you that in a second. So I'm going to start by saying that AD is congruent to BC because they're opposite sides of a parallelogram. And we know that they have to be congruent because of that. And then I have angle AED in the middle. It's congruent to angle CEB because they're vertical. And I said we were going to have one more thing, and that's going to be, depending on which way you look at it, I'll do these two angles here. So I am seeing these two parallels, the AD and the BC, and this diagonal. What was that called? Transversal. So there's my B and there's my D. And then we had these two angles that would have been alternate interior angles. That DB is serving as the transversal. So angle ADE is congruent to angle EBC because they were alternate interior. So then those two triangles have to be congruent by, do we remember? Side angle angle or angle angle side. There's two angles on one side. Triangle ADE is congruent to triangle CEB. So AE is congruent to CE. How do you remember this one? By corresponding parts of congruent triangles being congruent. Now the exact same steps would prove the other two. To do DE, nope. Actually, we can just do it right there because they're still part of that triangle. So again, by CPCTC, AE is EC, but also DE and DE and BE are congruent. Okay. So just by giving those two triangles to be congruent to each other, we were able to pull out both sets of diagonals and say that they had to be congruent to each other. Okay, so 3 and 2 are for you to do. All right, work on those, and then I will see you in the meet.